Equity-based curriculums around race, gender, sexualities open the door for conversations that help to prevent, address, and mitigate microaggressions.
School board, I quit. I quit your policies, I quit your trainings, and I quit being a cog in a machine that tells me to push highly politicized agendas on our most vulnerable constituents, the children.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is episode number 33 of The Right Take. I'm Eric Lendrum.
I'm Jacob Grandstaff.
And that was a sneak peek to very dramatic and very different audio clips from the latest. I was telling this, Jacob and I were talking about this just before we went on the air here, that it seems like all the viral videos of all these school board meetings with critical race theory and transgenderism and everything, they're all coming out of Loudoun County. It really is. It really does appear to be the epicenter, the hotbed, ground zero for this garbage of, far left cultural indoctrination that they are putting the youngest children through, the youngest students through. It's not just colleges anymore. It's K through 12. It's students of all ages. And that is going to be the first topic of our show today. We are going to be delving into quite a few individuals, shall we say, who definitely deserve to be metaphorically torn apart. We are including people on the conservative side and the left-wing side. So nobody is safe here at The Right Take. There are no sacred cows on this podcast. But to start off, Jacob, what's the latest going on at the Loudoun County School Board meetings?
Well, first of all, it was critical race theory. That was what there's actually a political pact that has been created specifically to fight critical race theory in Loudoun County, and I'm assuming they're going to expand throughout the rest of the country. But that was in May, June, July when they're focused on that. This is something completely different, but it's similar in that the Virginia legislature in April passed a law, signed, of course, by the social liberal in chief, Governor Ralph Northam, that requires every single school district in the state of Virginia to adopt policies that, A, force every single staff member, teacher, janitor, everyone to refer to transgender students by their preferred pronouns, or, of course, they could lose their job if they refuse to do that. B, allows any transgender child, any transgender teenager to use the bathroom and locker room of their choice. So if you have a boy who identifies as a girl, he is legal. Now it's legal for him to use the girl's bathroom and the girl's locker room. And also the third aspect of this bill is schools cannot deny the right of students to participate in the sports of their choice. So they have to allow. Now I would have to look at the specifics of this, but the law may specify that there has to have been a transition for a boy to participate in a girl's sports. But still, even then, you're
going to see a whole bunch of Laurel Hubbards at that point. You're going to see a bunch of men competing in women's sports and crushing the records, and it's going to be celebrated. The media is going to say, first transgender breaks world record.
They just broke the glass ceiling.
And all the women are off to the sideline. It's like there was this clip from the Olympics where three female weightlifters, actual female weightlifters, were at a press conference, and they were asked about Laurel Hubbard's participation. Like, do any of you have any comments on this historic day of the first transgender participation? And all three of them, for like 15 seconds straight, it was just dead silence. Like, none of them wanted to answer the question. You could tell they were.
But the thing is that's designed when they ask these questions like that, because this is the thing. Most Americans aren't paying attention to how authoritarian our society has become. The media is in cahoots with the agenda of forcing Americans to accept any form of sexual indoctrination that the institutions want to force on them. So in a situation like that, let's transition to, say, China.
Transition, good word use.
Yeah. Let's transition to China. Let's have that under Mao Zedong. So if there's an official government policy, and whatever, it could be anything, the media then, they're working with the communist government to make sure to enforce conformity among all their citizens. So if there's a Chinese athlete, they're going to go up and ask that athlete, what is your position on the chairman's speech the other day? What do you think about the chairman's speech? Well, obviously, there's only one correct answer. That's praising the chairman as if he's a god. If the athlete says anything derogatory about the chairman, they're going to be kicked out of the Olympics. They're probably going to be put in jail. They're probably going to be beaten and tortured, possibly killed.
They'll just disappear.
They could just disappear, or they could be publicly executed. I mean, that was perfectly all right during that era as well. So when you're in a situation like that, the media is complicit in enforcing conformity, because when you're asked a question by the media, if you respond the wrong way, then that clip is out there. And the people in our society who want to enforce these gender norms, they're going to take that and run with it, and they're going to make sure they destroy your life. You're not going to be able to get a good paying job. You're not going to be able to send your kids to college. You're not going to be able to do certain things. And it's almost, they have introduced the Chinese social credit system into our country. So as you can imagine, a lot of those athletes probably wanted to really let loose and say what they really thought about the tranny athlete, but they couldn't, because their future depended on them keeping their mouth shut. So you can either keep your mouth shut and not say your opinion, or you can just play along and praise the regime. But as the slogan during the Black Lives Matter movement went, silence is violence, they want to make it illegal to stay silent.
Like, if you're neutral, you're on the side of the oppressor. That's the logic they love to use.
But it's true, though, because they understand that people who are on the side of the oppressor, or the people they perceive to be oppressors, have learned to keep their mouth shut. So they naturally assume, and oftentimes correctly, that if you're not saying anything, you must disagree with the agenda. So in order to make sure that everyone is on board with the agenda, we have to make sure that every single sportscaster agrees with the agenda. How many ESPN commentators last year lambasted Black Lives Matter? How many how about Fox Sports? Did anyone at Fox Sports, do you know of any commentator that attacked Black Lives Matter? Like, not just respectfully disagreed with it, but outright attacked it. If they did, they would have lost their job immediately. They would have been fired, because that goes against what the institutional regime wants. So you have a situation now where all the school boards in Virginia, and this is top down, so no school board is allowed to refuse it. If a school board refuses it, they can be sued by the state, because this is now state law. If a school board refuses it, not only can they be sued by the state, but the state government can withhold funds from their school board. So now they can, try to go around and ask donations from the parents. Hey, you want to fund the school? The parents eventually are going to get tired of that. They're like, no, just give in, just submit. And this is by design. And so in Loudoun County, this is what they were debating, the school board meeting last night. They had about 150 parents show up. And what's happening is each individual school board has to pass its own policy. So the state law requires the school boards to pass policies that line up with the Department of Education's guidelines, or they can go further. So they can, as long as they meet the minimum requirement, transgender kids have to be able to use the bathroom of their choice. They have to be able to play the sports of their choice. They have to have their preferred pronouns used. That's the minimum requirements. But they can go further if they want. Like, you could make it so that, I don't know, let's say a student who refuses to use the preferred pronoun of one of his classmates is suspended for a week. Like, if they want, that would be acceptable. They just can't do anything less than the required minimum. So each school board is responsible for passing their own policy on transgender students, as long as it meets those minimal requirements. So this was Loudoun County School Board looking to pass their own version of the Transgender Inclusivity Act, or whatever. I don't remember what this act was called. But during the school board meeting, most of the parents that showed up, they were vehemently against it. And it got pretty heated, almost as heated as the critical race theory school board meetings. And as you heard the clip, there was this one fifth grade teacher, Laura Morris, who decided to quit, and she quit on the spot. And of course, that clip has gone viral. And hopefully this wakes a lot more parents up, because as I'm going to show with the Fairfax County School Board, what's happening is most people don't pay attention to politics. They don't know anything about any of this stuff.
They tune in once every 4 years to do one thing, and then that's it.
Yes, and whenever they tune in once every 4 years, they're presented with the narrative that the mainstream media wants them to know. So your average voter out there who doesn't pay attention to politics, let's say your average upper middle class voter in Loudoun or Fairfax County, they tune in September of 2020. There's a presidential election, so they figure, okay, let's see, who am I going to vote for? I voted for Barack Obama in 2008, Obama in 2012, I voted for Clinton in 2016. Trump's been doing an okay job. Let me go check out what Joe and Donald are saying. And the first thing they hear is that Trump called our soldiers suckers and losers at the World War I Memorial Battlefield in France.
Which literally did not happen, but the media made it sound like it did.
They don't know any different. They're like, wow, every single news outlet is reporting this. This was reported by The Atlantic. They're a reputable news organization, so it must be true. And then the next thing they know is the New York Times is coming out with Trump's tax form showing that he didn't pay any taxes several years, and he paid less taxes than they did. And here he is, a billionaire, and they're thinking, wow, I mean, I don't make much money, but I pay almost 40% of my income in taxes. Now you got this billionaire Trump. He's not paying anything in taxes. That's not fair.
And then at the same time, while these fake stories are being put out about Trump, the real stories about Joe Biden, like, Hunter's laptop, is completely spiked, and they're not hearing about it at all.
Yeah, they don't hear anything. But if they do hear about it, it's just a right-wing conspiracy theory. It's a right-wing conspiracy theory.
It didn't happen.
So tonight they're going to have, what they did last night is they postponed the meeting because there's so much outrage. They just decided to postpone the meeting until tonight. So they're going to vote on that tonight. They're most likely going to pass it because the school board in Northern Virginia, all the elected offices are held by Democrats. They're completely dominated by Democrats. So the only way to stop this from happening is to recall these school board members or to just wait till the next election and elect somebody new. And you have to hope that all these parents that are up in arms about critical race theory and boys being able to go into girls' bathrooms are going to be paying attention during the next election. That's one of the difficulties of the right, is getting comfortable middle-class people to stay engaged, because they'll get hyped up about something and then they'll lose interest in a few months and, they'll just go about their normal daily lives. But in Fairfax County, which is right next to Loudoun County, this is from the Daily Caller. This is from August 6th. It says, a school in Virginia showed second graders an anti-police video telling children, quote, "I feel safe when there are no police," the Fairfax Times reported. The video was included in a summer learning guide at Bailey's Elementary School for the Arts and Sciences in Falls Church, according to the Fairfax Times. Falls Church, that's the town that recently the school board in Fairfax County voted to change the name. Their elite school is called Thomas Jefferson High School. They decided to change the name because Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner.
He was a racist. Never mind that, he was our third president, one of our founding fathers. And, he wrote the Declaration of Independence. No, none of that matters because he had a few slaves.
Yeah, he owned slaves. So he's canceled. Woke Kindergarten. This is not a joke. This is what this group is called. Woke Kindergarten, a group describing itself as committed to abolitionist early education and pro-black liberation, created the video. The minute-long video says that all people deserve to feel safe in their bodies, schools, and community. Quote, "Why do some people feel safe with police and others don't?" the narrator asked. The video concludes by saying it's everyone's job to help people who are being treated unfairly, while showing a picture of a Black Lives Matter protest. And this is in school. This is in a second grade class this is given to. The summer guidance may have also been available to students at other schools in the Fairfax County School District. Asra Nomani, a vice president at Parents Defending Education who has 3 teenage children enrolled in the district, told Fox News. A spokesperson for Fairfax County Public Schools had told the Fairfax Times that officials posted the video by mistake and removed it as soon as the administration was aware. And of course, this is what happens. If something embarrassing comes out, then the companies will say, "Oh, well, that's one of our employees. They just did that by mistake. We're looking into the situation." Or if it's a school board,
it's always human error. It's always one person.
Yeah. It's never a policy. It's never a systemic policy to implement this. At a Fairfax County School Board meeting in July, Michelle Leet, an official with the county's group NAACP, labeled anyone who opposed critical race theory as anti-equity, anti-history, anti-racial reckoning, anti-opportunity, among other things. She even said, "Let them die," at the in-person meeting on video. On video, she said, "Let them die," talking about anyone who opposes critical race theory. And this is something that so many comfortable suburban white middle-class parents do not understand. They don't understand where the rage was coming from Black Lives Matter. Or first of all, they didn't even see a lot of the riots.
They were told it was peaceful protests.
They were told it was peaceful protests. They saw on television there were a few broken windows in a few obscure cities.
And the CNN reporter literally saying, "Ignore the burning building behind me, folks. This is a peaceful protest."
It's mostly peaceful. So they didn't see the rage and the violence and the extremism that happened during the summer of Black Lives Matter. So they're not fully aware of the full picture. And secondly, even if they do see it, they typically seem to be very confused. I've noticed they seem to be perplexed as to why this is happening, why black people are so angry. They don't understand it, and they think that there's a quick fix to it.
We had a black president not so long ago. Why are they so mad?
Yeah, this is a common response you hear from a lot of normie white people is, "Well, we elected a black president. We can't be racist. Why are they saying we're racist? We already elected a black president. We elected him to 2 terms. I voted for him myself just to show that I'm not a racist."
No, stop! Don't beat me with that wrench. I voted for Biden. Yeah, no, stop.
Exactly. Yeah, like the family, the older couple that BLM showed up to their house and they're like, "Oh, please don't break anything. Look, we've got our Biden sign in the front,"
and they threw him to the sidewalk anyway.
But yeah, they don't care. But yeah, so this lady, she's an official with the Fairfax County NAACP. She said on video very proudly said that anyone who doesn't agree with critical race theory, let them die. This is a subset of black Democrats, of leftist black people. I wouldn't even call them leftists. They're more black nationalists.
That's all Black Lives Matter is. It's black nationalism.
Yeah, they're actually right-wing. Like if you had an all-black American country, BLM would be the most right-wing faction in that country.
They are capitalists. They absolutely support capitalism because they want their people installed on boards of directors. They want to become CEOs. They support capitalism. They support the big corporations. I'm sure some of them probably do support the Second Amendment. They want to have guns, to protect themselves from evil whitey. But yeah, no, it isn't a left-wing movement by any means. It's not really left or right. At the end of the day, it's about the advancement of their interests.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is with a lot of parents, a lot of specifically white suburban parents, is the reason why they're confused and perplexed about why they're having all this racial training, why everyone's so focused on race. They think that, okay, well, they're angry that their ancestors were slaves. They're angry about what my ancestors or even other white people's ancestors did to them. No, they're angry about what they think you personally have done to them. You personally support a systemic racist country. You personally support systems that are explicitly racist and keep black people back. You are at fault, not your ancestors, not your neighbors, not the racist rednecks 5 counties over in the woods. You specifically, the suburban, middle-class, middle-aged mom. You are responsible for every bit of suffering that black people face.
And your kid is responsible, too.
Yeah, your kid is responsible because he was born white.
And because he may choose, a white doll over a black doll when he gets a couple months older.
Yeah. Well, that would prove that he's actually transgender, secretly transgender, and you need to you need to address that when he's young. Make sure he transitions. That would be their argument with that.
Why can't we just have nice things? Why can't our kids be allowed to go to a normal school and not get sex and race shoved down their throats? Why are they so? We know why. We know why they are so determined to go after the kids. Because when you take over the kids, I think it was one of the Nazis, right, who said, give me their children and I will control their futures.
I think it was the Nazi who said that.
It wasn't Goebbels. It was actually the guy with the bad mustache.
So a lot of parents have actually been waking up, and there's recall efforts going on in Fairfax County and Loudoun County. They're attempting. There's 9 school board members in Loudoun County. They're currently going through the process of collecting signatures to recall 6 of the 9. In Fairfax County, they're trying to recall all but 1. And in Fairfax County, it's mainly because they kept schools closed for an entire year. This is from the Braddock Buzz. It's a local little blog. They interviewed the lady who's behind the Fairfax County recall. Dee O'Neill was a single mom juggling parenting, private tutoring, and flexible contract work with a political resume consisting of a single item. She'd once made calls on behalf of a Democratic school board candidate. So this is your typical normie, hardworking mom who's a single mom trying to juggle child rearing and making a living. She's not overtly political. The only political activism that she'd ever done was making calls on behalf of a Democratic school board member. But in late 2020, her outrage over pandemic school closures boiled over, and she founded the Open FCPS Coalition, which is waging recall campaigns against 3 school board members, the Drainsville District's Elaine Tholen, Springfield's Laura Jane Cohen, and at-large member Abrar Omeish, I guess I'm pronouncing that right. Last month, the coalition hit a major milestone, surpassing the 3,600 signatures required for a recall filing against Tholen. The recall process in Virginia is murky, and there are a few precedents, but at the very least, Tholen has to defend her record before a Fairfax County circuit judge. They got to get at least 10% in signatures of the people who voted in the school board members district in the last election. So if a school board members district had 10,000 people show up in the last election and vote, they've got to get 1,000 signatures. Once they reach 10%, then it goes to a circuit court judge. And then the circuit court judge holds a hearing. The judge can choose to refuse it and throw it out, which if it's a Democratic judge, he probably will.
Most likely.
But if he wants to, he can hold a hearing and determine whether or not the school board member violated his or her duty as a school board member. And if the judge decides they did, then they gone, and then you have a recall election, or what would you call it? Not a recall election, a special election, and you reelect a new school board member. So it's probably not going to get anywhere, but it is impressive that they have managed to collect enough signatures for at least one of these candidates.
It's also interesting that, as you noted, the woman behind it literally used to be a Democratic activist.
Yeah, and in fact, in the interview, they asked her why she founded Open FCPS Coalition, and she said, I'm just a regular parent. I'm a member of a couple of open school groups, and I attended rallies in the fall and summer last year. One day I was just like, I've had it. This is morally wrong. I felt that it was deeper than just people being cautious. Other states were doing the right thing by their kids, and we were not. At first, I suggested we do a lawsuit, but it took us about 10 minutes to realize a lawsuit was going to cost too much money that we didn't have. So we thought, why don't we do recalls? Now I'm thinking a lawsuit might have been easier. So they asked her if she'd ever been involved in politics or political organizing. She said, not really. I helped with 1 or 2 school board campaigns, doing calls and stuff like that. Funnily enough, when I helped with the school board in the past, it was for a Democrat. And now everyone's like, you guys are going after the school board because you hate Democrats. I considered myself politically dialed in, but I guess I wasn't when it came to the school board. I honestly did not have a clue when we decided to do a recall that the entire board was made up of Democrats. And when you look at the voting patterns of Northern Virginia, you would assume that 80-90% of the people here are hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool, vote blue no matter who Democrats. But when you get out and talk to people, you find that's just not the case. What you have in the D.C. area is you have a very politically dialed-in, vocal minority that they're active every single local and federal election. They get involved in state politics where they live. They get involved in every single, down to the city council, the county commissioner's race, and they make sure that they are vocally active in the Democratic primaries so that every single Democratic candidate that makes it to the general election is a dyed-in-the-wool progressive.
And you can bet these same people are also very active on social media.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, not again, a lot of parents probably are not. I'm willing to bet a lot of parents still to this day probably are not on Twitter. They just think of it as, that platform that Trump used to use.
Yeah, they don't pay much attention at all. They might watch the local news at night whenever they come home from work or whatever. They might read, and they'll read the headlines of major news sources like Associated Press. They might watch a little CNN. But for these people, the people who are dialed in, you got to remember, being the nation's capital, there's hundreds of political think tanks in this area, consulting firms in this area,
lobbying groups.
Yes, exactly. So if you're a Democrat, if you're a progressive in, let's say, in Arlington County, Fairfax County, and you want to run for school board, you have unlimited access to the best political consultants in the entire world. You have access to the best political operatives in the entire world. And oftentimes, a lot of these political operatives, because they're progressives, they're not doing it just for the money. They're doing it for the cause.
They actually believe in the cause.
Whereas on the right, if you're a conservative, first of all, you can't be too conservative, or the consultants and the political operatives on the right around D.C. won't work for you.
You've got to be like a Chandler Thornton, the college Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they'll feel like you'll ruin their reputation if they work for you and they have you on their resume, so they won't work for you. So you have to be a moderate if you are on the right.
You can't be one of those conservatives,
right? But secondly, even if you are a moderate, and even if you do manage to find really good consultants and really good political operatives, they're interested. The reason why they're Republicans isn't because they believe in any kind of cause. They're Republicans because they believe in making money. They see the American dream as getting rich and making it big. They're interested in money. They're interested in power. They're interested in influence. And so if you're not going to pay them gobs of money, they're not going to work for you. They'll go work for someone who will pay them gobs of money, and they're perfectly fine if it's a private industry or whatever doing non-political work. They just want to make the money. And this is the difference between the Democratic operatives and the Republican operatives. So you have these local candidates for school board, for county commissioner, what have you, for sheriff in Northern Virginia. They have unlimited access to all of this brain capital in D.C. So they're able to dominate the Democratic primaries. And then in the general election, they're able to use these consultants, to use these operatives to mollify their message in such a way to where they speak to the progressives and let the young progressives know that they're their guy or they're their gal. And then they're also able to speak to the normie, moderate independents in these counties with kids who are working parents and let them know that they're just normal, common sense people who want to do good by the students, that they care about students, they care about education, they want to prepare the next generation for the future, yada, yada, yada. So they're able to micro-target these certain demographics and make sure that each demographic doesn't hear anything they're not supposed to hear. So they don't tell these parents, when these people ran for school board, because all these people were elected, they didn't tell these parents that are outraged, hey, we're going to introduce critical race theory to your kids. Of course, parents wouldn't have known what critical race theory is at the time. But even if they explained it, they're not going to explain to these parents, this is what we're going to do when we get elected, or we support letting boys go into girls' bathrooms.
Of course not.
No, what they would do is they would cloak it in terms that parents... Think about a busy...
They say that we're tolerant and equal. We'll support tolerance of all genders, and we'll teach about racial justice. They'll make it sound pretty.
And the parents thinking, oh, that's nice. I believe in equity too. I think that all races should be respected. I think everyone, regardless of their sexual orientation, that they should be respected. That's good. I agree with that. Okay, I'll vote for it. And now these parents are like, wow, where's all this coming from? My little girl is going to potentially get molested when she goes to the bathroom by this boy who wants to pretend he's a girl so he can go in there and molest little girls, and there's nothing I can do about it. And they've got to say, nope, there's nothing you can do about it, because the Democrats when they took control of the legislature, they ran on this. They said they were going to do this, and you weren't paying attention.
And my kid is now going to be taught that he's racist just because of the color of his skin, and that he should disavow me and his grandparents just because they're all white.
Yeah, and the Democrats who are elected, they're like, we ran on this stuff. We told you what we were going to do, and you weren't paying attention. So guess what? There's nothing you can do about it. You can take your kid out and pay for private school if you want, but that's expensive. And, you're still going to pay taxes. That's the thing. You can enroll your kid in private school, but you're still going to pay taxes and pay our salaries whether you do or not. Every single politician who has equity in their platform, what equity means with these people is reparations, restorative and reparative justice. What that means is everything you take the intersectional, I guess what would you call it, like the how you got the food chart, the federally approved food pyramid. You kind of have the intersectional oppressive pyramid. What they want to do is they want to make sure that every group that was a little bit above another group in the historical pyramid that they've created in their minds, but get an extra hand up because they've been historically oppressed. And, of course, obviously, if your kid is white and male, they're going to now be at the very bottom because they have historically been at the top. Doesn't matter if they're 6 years old. Just because of their sex and because of their race, they are automatically privileged. And this is stuff that these people ran on, but it's just like in Loheimer's book, in Lieutenant Colonel Loheimer's book that we covered, when he talks about critical race theory and the equity initiatives, these people will use buzzwords that the average person has no clue what they mean, or they mean something to the average person that mean something completely different to the person that's using them. And that's how these people are able to get this stuff through.
Even the idea of critical race theory itself, like the phrase critical race theory doesn't sound so terrible. It sounds like one of those academic terms like, oh, you probably have to have an education to know what that means. Well, it doesn't sound so bad.
Well, it's like Bill Maher. Yeah, it's like Bill Maher said in his interview with Ben Shapiro. He said the average person knows that it's a theory, and they know it's about race, but that's about it. And in the polls that they've taken, it's like 45% of Americans have no clue what it means. And here we are. This is the biggest issue in politics, and most people don't have any idea what it means until the Democrats can be voted out, and you can get hopefully Youngkin gets elected and he can repeal that law. Then this is just something people have to live with. But the thing is, it didn't have to come this far. What should have happened last summer is all of these parents that are upset about critical race theory, they should have been getting in the streets demonstrating against Black Lives Matter. And they would have known to do that if the intellectual right had been preparing people at the grassroots level for years, starting back with Trayvon Martin, on what Black Lives Matter is. But typically what happens is people on the right, the intellectual right, the donor class, they ignore race. They pretend that race doesn't exist. They live in this fantasy whereby we're all colorblind. There's no historical differences, and there's also no historical clashes over interpretations of history. And what you end up getting from that is riots, and then you have an NAACP member at the Fairfax County School Board saying that people who don't agree with their kids being belittled because of their race should die. And
it's all because they can live. They're free to live colorblind all they want. Yes, I don't discriminate against anybody, and that's fine. That's good for you. But the left doesn't live like that. That this cultural left, this cultural revolution that's underway, it is operating under the assumption that there are differences between the races.
And so the question may be, okay, how do parents who are working parents, who are just trying to live their lives and just live normal lives, not bother anybody, just raise their kids to have a good education and be good citizens, how do they combat this and still, not give up anything? Well, you have to attack it as if it's a cancer. When you have this ideology that believes in leveling all of society, all social classes, completely leveling even sex itself. Completely, you can be any gender. You can be a male on Monday, a female on Tuesday, back to being a male on Wednesday. When you have an ideology like that, you have to root out that ideology wherever it exists. And just to give one example, let's say if you're a parent and you want to make sure that this stuff doesn't get into your school, you need to pay attention to people who are running for school board, focus on their campaign literature. If they mention the word equity in any of their campaign literature, in any of their speeches, they need to be dealt with. You need to make sure that they lose their primary. If they don't lose their Democratic primary, you need to make sure that you mobilize against them and make sure that they lose the general election. Because if they have equity in any of their material, if they say the word equity in any of their speeches, They agree with this whole agenda. They agree with letting boys go into girls' bathrooms. They agree with reparations to black people. They agree with belittling white people for being white. They agree with making sure that Asian Americans aren't allowed to achieve their full potential. And this is one thing, this is why at Thomas Jefferson High School, enrollment of Asian Americans has gone down since they eliminated the entrance exam. But if they use the word equity in any of their literature or speeches, you know that they're the enemy and they have to be dealt with. They have to be defeated at the polls.
So you mentioned earlier, at one point, you briefly brought up my favorite right-wing commentator, Ben Shapiro. That's sarcasm, by the way, for those of you guys who still don't know. Yeah, that's our next topic, by the way. This is, when I saw this, oh, goodness. I think I talked about this a little bit in my origin story episode 10, that I used to be a huge Ben Shapiro fanboy. Emphasis on used to. I am not a fan of Ben Shapiro anymore. So, he was on Bill Maher's show. On a panel with, of course, Bill Maher was the host, and his rival, if you will, they had several debates over the course of the episode, is a guy named Malcolm Nance. I didn't really know who this guy was until recently. The most I can gather, I was told, he was described to me quite accurately, I think, is he basically thinks he's a black Jack Ryan. You know, he thinks, the character from the Tom Clancy novel. He thinks that he is a national security, counterterrorism, intelligence expert. Because I guess he has some brief experience in the Department of Defense. I'm not sure under which administration, but he's an older guy. He's written a bunch of books, I guess, and he makes all the rounds, especially during the Trump years. He was just like these other losers like Alexander Vindman or Miles Taylor, the author of the anonymous "I am the resistance, I the Trump administration from the government" op-ed, like in the New York Times. Like these absolute clowns, these busboys who think they are experts and think that they have like medals of honor, basically. And they go, and of course, MSNBC and all these people eat them right up. And they had a couple of debates. So the one that's been going viral, the one that people were sharing the most, is they debated on critical race theory. Malcolm Nance is black, by the way, for context, so because that obviously plays into this. So critical race theory, they had a debate on it, and everyone's saying, oh yeah, Ben Shapiro mopped the floor with him. And yes, on paper, by the words, yes, Ben Shapiro mopped the floor with Malcolm X. Malcolm X. He wishes he were Malcolm X. Excuse me. Malcolm Nance. He wiped the floor with him because he pointed out, critical race theory, all the problems with it. And it's all about, it's very much drawn to, white people are bad. America is systemically racist. White people are racist, et cetera, et cetera. And Nance is he basically acted like Kamala Harris in the vice presidential debate with Mike Pence last year, being dismissive and rude and giggling and laughing and just ad hominem attacks and making fun of Ben Shapiro's podcast and no facts whatsoever. He contradicted himself at some points. Like at one point, he agreed with Ben Shapiro's definition of what critical race theory is, and later in the same argument, he said, oh, no, that's not critical race theory. He contradicted himself. Total non-argument. But of course, it didn't help that Maher's audience are just clapping and barking like seals for everything that Malcolm Nance says, even if it's just a straight-up insult, and not a single clap for Ben Shapiro. Even when Bill Maher himself took Shapiro's side a couple times. At one point, he said, well, if critical race theory is all about teaching kids all about race, I'm not for that. If critical race theory is all about collective guilt of white people, I'm not for that. Which, again, Bill Maher, he has some moments of sensibility. It's actually very, very refreshing. But even then, the audience is going nuts for Nance. But that's what everyone is sharing. What they are not sharing, this is what it should be sharing from the same episode. At a certain point, they talked about January 6th. And this is what Malcolm Nance had to say.
But let's talk about bare facts. I mean, you're talking about a guy, Donald Trump, who literally tried to suborn, who has probably suborned perjury in order to overthrow a duly elected government and managed to mobilize 40,000 people, right, to lay siege to the Capitol, where over 1,000 or more entered the building, destroyed parts of the building, fought physically. Law enforcement there in order to stop American democracy. Now, but I've been around a little bit, and I've seen some dictators and warlords and authoritarians. That is authoritarianism. You can't say some guys are writing on Twitter and they made, Sean King want to sell his house. That's, like you say, it's just gossip, right? Twitter will not kill you unless you use that social pressure in order to achieve an action on the street. And believe me...
Well, I'm going to address that in a minute.
Okay.
But I want you... You can answer this first.
Thank you. So Maher hints it over to Shapiro. And what do you guys think Ben Shapiro is going to say? You think he's the master debater, right? What's he going to say? Is he going to dispute the facts about January 6th, or the facts, quote unquote. He's going to give the facts about January 6th. Is he going to call Malcolm Nance out? No. He's going to do what Ben Shapiro does. He's going to virtue signal and fence sit.
I appreciate it. A couple of quick things. One, 40,000 people did not assault the Capitol. Okay, that's just factually inaccurate. There were maybe 1,000 people. That is not making light of the evil of those people who all will end up rotting in prison, as they should.
Evil, the evil, and they will be rotting in prison for the rest of their lives, as they should. Jacob, help me out here, because yes, the left has gone insane over what happened on January 6th, which I still maintain to this day, factually, correctly, was a peaceful protest. That's what it was. It was a peaceful protest, a little bit of rambunctiousness, but it was not cities being burned to the ground like we saw last year. The left has called these people terrorists. The left has said they're traitors, they're insurrectionists, whatever. Never heard of an unarmed insurrection, but okay. Has anyone on the left gone so far as to call them evil?
I haven't heard that. So the little old granny with the bag of hat who walked in through an open door because the door was open and the police were standing by allowing the protesters to walk in.
Ushering them in.
She should rot in prison.
Yeah, or the dude, the boomer dude just sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk, kicking his feet up on the desk, like laughing, throwing up a peace sign for this pictures. Like, that guy, yeah, that guy's evil. He's evil. Like, when you think of evil, of course, most people think of the devil. They think of Lucifer, naturally. Genocidal maniacs, Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, evil. But really? These people, these MAGA protesters, ooh, I'm willing to bet quite a few of them, especially the boomers, the older people, are probably fans of you, Benny boy. Ben was on Fox News not too long ago. He was on that, the Outnumbered program where it's 4 women and 1 dude. He was the 1 dude not too long ago. He still is on Fox News. You mentioned a little while ago about the politicians who pull what they pull with CRT and transgenderism, that they don't want certain facts about their beliefs to be heard by the people who should be voting for them. They keep them just out of the spotlight until they're elected. Ben is the same way. He keeps these kinds of opinions. Why do you think he's saying this on Bill Maher's show on HBO? Which, this kind of content usually you have to pay for. It's HBO. You think he would, for a second, he would say this on Fox News?
Oh, no.
Of course
not a chance.
Would he say this on his podcast? His radio show? Of course not. No, because quite a few of those people are your fans. And as we have seen, as I've said, a lot of people are seeing, if they're seeing anything from this episode of Bill Maher's show, they're seeing him destroy Malcolm Nance on critical race theory, which is good for him. Good for him. It's like debating a child. Again, Malcolm Nance is a literal child. He has no rhetoric. He's not a smart debater. He doesn't come across as a smart man. Again, he's fraudulent. He's honestly is a fraudulent man, overblowing his credentials. But then on this really crucial issue, this is an issue people care about. The amount of grassroots right-wing support among the base, not organized from the top down by like public figures or anything, from the base, from the grassroots, that are bringing awareness to what is happening to those January 6 prisoners. They're political prisoners. They're being held in solitary confinement. They're being denied their rights to an attorney. Some of them are being beaten by the prison guards. And they're facing extreme sentences for what? For trespassing? They're all being charged with trespassing at most. Not one of them has been charged with assault or terrorism or insurrection. But according to Ben, and again, this is something you wouldn't even hear from the left, but this is one of the leading right-wing commentators. This guy has the most popular conservative podcast, according to him at least. The truth about Ben Shapiro is told by Ben Shapiro. He's constantly the number one. I think we talked about this in our interview with Tom Pappert of National File. Facebook will shadow boost this guy more than any other conservative, constantly top 10 lists of most popular Facebook posts and sponsored posts from any conservative. The only other one who maybe comes close is Dan Bongino, but this guy is constantly being promoted by Facebook, Daily Wire, all over the place. And this is what he thinks about Trump supporters. They are evil and deserve to rot in prison for the rest of their lives. They don't get to see their family anymore. Nothing. Their family, they will eventually die in prison, leave behind kids, grandkids, nephews, nieces, brothers, sisters, spouses. Everybody should share this. Everyone needs, and believe me, we're posting links in the description below for this one especially. This guy is not conservative. He is not on your side. This is what he thinks of all Trump supporters. Keep in mind, this guy was never for Trump. He was a never Trumper. In 2016, he was all Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, the same thing, folks, okay? There's no difference between the two of them. You might as well not vote at the top of the ticket, folks. Might as well not vote at the top of the ticket. They're the same person. They're both terrible and disgusting. And I don't like Donald Trump. And he's disgusting. He is not in tune with what the base wants. He doesn't care about you guys. He doesn't care about Trump voters. He wants to go back to Bush-era neoconservatism, to foreign policy. intervention overseas. Yeah, okay, he's good on social issues. Yeah, he is very firmly against transgenderism. He's against abortion. Good for him. But at the end of the day, he does not agree with the vast majority. He doesn't agree with protectionism. He's all about free trade. You know, he doesn't want to crack down on big tech and monopolies. He had that debate with Tucker Carlson. You know, let the free market work everything out, folks. He does not support what you believe in. He does not support your guy. He wants nothing more than for the Trump movement to just go away. And if locking up a couple thousand MAGA protesters, peaceful protesters who did nothing wrong, they didn't attack anybody, they didn't kill anybody, they didn't even so much as break a window, much less burn anything down, then what does he think about the movement as a whole? He thinks it's repugnant.
Well, what he's doing here is what a lot of conservatives do who are in conservatism for the fiscal aspects of it, or possibly the foreign policy, don't really care that much about the social issues or the nationalistic issues like immigration.
The culture war.
They don't care about the culture war. What they'll do is whenever they're in a debate with a leftist, is when they're confronted with some bad behavior by someone on the right or nominally on the right, is before they address the root, before they go back to the main topic, is they first of all have to disavow that person.
Disavow. I'm not like them. Yeah, right. He doesn't lead in with, well, he did lead in initially with, oh, you're wrong about this, but he buried the lead in favor of, I'm going to go out of my way to condemn these people who are on the same side as me.
And if you remember, the very first interview in which Ben Shapiro really got big was with Piers Morgan over the Second Amendment.
Gun control after Sandy Hook, yeah.
Yeah, and it was right after Piers Morgan had that famous interview with Alex Jones. And Piers, during the interview with Ben Shapiro, was just, all he said was, well, as I was telling Alex Jones, he was just trying to relate what he had told Alex Jones. And rather than letting him finish his sentence, Shapiro cuts in and says, don't let me in with Alex Jones. And Shapiro and
several times.
Yeah, Pierce is like, okay, well, as I was telling Alex Jones, don't lump me in with Alex Jones. Like, well, I'm not lumping you in with him. I'm just telling you. As I was telling Alex Jones. Points? Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing. They have to anytime people who are on the respectable right feel like they're being lumped in with people that they don't respect on the right, who are maybe a couple of classes below them. They haven't been to the same Ivy League schools that they've been. They've got to immediately disavow. Like, I disavow, and then they can finally move on to the point. If Shapiro, all he had to do was say, well, what does this have to do with critical race theory or whatever they were talking about? Like, he could have just deflected even if he wanted to hide. But he's not even interested in hiding because he has to signal to all the leftists watching Bill Maher's show that they don't need to lump him in with people like those January 6th protesters.
And of course, they still did not clap for him. Like, they didn't clap for him once. The audience never clapped for Shapiro in the entirety of any of these clips I've seen. But also fundamentally because at the end of the day, what else is he going to do other than dispute the numbers? All it comes down to is disputing the numbers of how many people. He's not, the main argument Nance was making wasn't even how many people assaulted the Capitol. Was it 40,000? Was it 39,000? The argument he's making is Donald Trump is an authority. He's a warlord. He's a cult leader. He committed violence. He used Twitter to try to kill people. And Shapiro can't even go that far to say that's absurd. You're being ridiculous because that would involve defending Donald Trump. And he doesn't like Donald Trump. Period. He never has and never will. And yeah, there are people at the Daily Wire. People say, oh, there's good people at the Daily Wire who do support Trump. Andrew Clavin, Michael Knowles, Candace Owens. And yeah, those are good people. They support Trump. But this is the head guy. And this is why when people ask me, it's the same with the Blaze. People say, Eric, why don't you like the Blaze? I say 2 words, Glenn Beck. All right. It's Glenn Beck's outfit. He is an ever-Trumper. He always was and always will be. Same with Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro. He was one of the most vocal never-Trumpers. And again, this is why a coworker of mine suggested this to me the other day. This is why he doesn't get in trouble with the left. This is why the New York Times will run a glowing story declaring Ben Shapiro to be a, quote, conservative gladiator. They'll write fondly of him. They won't write hit pieces on him like they would with, Milo Yiannopoulos or more provocative culture warriors from the right. They want someone like this who will disavow Trump and call Trump supporters evil. They want this to be the face of the right. That is the definition of controlled opposition.
Yep, he's not a threat to their worldview and their vision of America and the world. That's why he's like, they're fine with a right existing. They don't want a single party system.
They want a Romney, Shapiro, Bush era right. They are terrified of the idea of a right in the mold of what Donald Trump started and what Donald Trump is still leading, or others like Ron DeSantis at this point.
But just one more point on this is here's why the intellectual right tends to lose to the intellectual left is because whenever you confront the intellectual left with what the Black Lives Matter rioters did into this past summer or summer 2020, they'll ask you, why were these people rioting? What's the root cause of their anger? You ask someone on the intellectual right, about the January 6th protesters rather than ask why they were angry, what the cause of their rage was. They immediately disavow, immediately attack those protesters without offering any explanation, and they'll tell you straight up there's no justification for what they did. And they won't even discuss the root causes. So as long as the intellectual left has the backs of the rank and file folks on the street level on the left,
and keeps bailing them out and publicly promoting, hey, donate here to the bail fund for the Minneapolis protesters. They're not rioters, they're protesters. They treat their radicals like they are one of them. They don't turn their backs on them, they let them go. Whereas the right, and there are some exceptions. I actually did see another article that Dinesh D'Souza and his wife donated about $100,000 to the January 6th Family Fund, which specifically goes to financially aiding the families of prisoners, not the prisoners themselves, which that would be nice. But in this case, it's to the families, like, because quite a few of them are working men and women who provide for their families, and their families obviously are without a breadwinner right now. So this is giving money to help them support, their kids going to school or whatever. And good for them. And that's great. Applause for the D'Souzas. That's good. We need to see more of that and less of rhetoric like this guy from the so-called leader of the right. I don't want to hear it. And if you guys thought I was going to calm down after that, you are wrong, because next up for our main topic, we had to do this. We had to do it to him. There's nobody else worth talking about right now more than the Michael Corleone of New York, or at least he wishes he was. Andrew Cuomo, guys. Oh, goodness gracious. So, yeah, this is, as of the recording of this, he announced his resignation yesterday. I had to look outside to check for pigs flying. I had to check to see if there were snowballs in hell that weren't melting right away. Yeah, he resigned, guys. He is out. Andrew Cuomo is no more. He announced his resignation effective 14 days after the fact. So he announced it on August 10th. So he will presumably at this point step down on August the 24th, 2021. So let me go ahead and just get my roasting out of the way. I'm going to get the roasting out of the way real quick, because we talked about this guy once before, that, he was responsible for the deaths of thousands of senior citizens in New York in nursing homes via his disastrous COVID policies. We'll come back to that later. But this guy's a scumbag. I'm going to take this moment. We're going to dance on his political grave here because he deserves it. I think if nothing else, it needs to be pointed out. This is one of my favorite observations. It's so clear that a lot of people in that family are trying so hard to be like each other. You remember that viral video of Chris Cuomo's younger brother, the Mickey Mouse host on CNN, getting enraged when someone called him Fredo? Because, of course, they're comparing him, I referenced it already, they're comparing him to the Godfather character, right? You have the youngest of the three brothers, as Michael Corleone, Al Pacino, who becomes the vicious, ruthless Don of the family after the dad dies. And his older brother, the middle son, is Fredo, and he's dumb. He's polite and well-meaning, and he cares about people. He's very compassionate. He's got a heart of gold, but he's dumb, and he's not ruthless. He's not calculating, and he is the one who's being always sent off. Send Fredo to do this. Send Fredo to do that. Send Fredo to look after some Mickey Mouse nightclub somewhere. And he's just infuriated that he was stepped over for Don of the family. And, of course, this leads to him betraying the family in the second film, which, personal opinion, I think is better than the first, but that's just me. And, of course, Michael has him assassinated. So the idea that, of course, younger Chris Cuomo feels inferior to his older brother, the governor of New York, and that's why he got so mad. He freaked out at that guy, and now everybody on the right calls him Fredo, because we know it bothers him. And it's true. That's why he got so mad. You can tell it bothered him. He knew right away. It wasn't because Fredo was the Italian equivalent of the N-word. It's because he knew people were pointing out his inferiority to his brother. In a lot of the same ways, I really do think Andrew Cuomo was trying so hard to be his dad. His father was Mario Cuomo. His father served 3 terms as governor of New York before him, and he was seeking a 4th term in 1994. Of course, as we all know, 1994 was a very bad year for Democrats, and one of the biggest victories that year was in the New York governor's race, when he was challenged and narrowly defeated by like a 3-point margin by a Republican by the name of George Pataki. And he was denied for his 4th term. So Cuomo, especially after coronavirus, he was widely seen with all his daily briefings, bolstered by Fox, because, as we said, Fox is based in New York, so of course they're going to cover everything Cuomo does because they're a bit biased towards it. He was propped up by the media and late-night comedians and social media as he's the shadow president. He's the real leadership we're not getting from Donald Trump. They were prepared for Cuomo to be the next standard bearer, not Kamala Harris. They wanted Cuomo to be the nominee in 2024 to save us from the Trump era and bring real leadership, just like he did to New York. And he knew this, and his approval ratings were really high. He got an Emmy and everything. And the media even covered up and let him skate on the nursing home thing. And he was cruising towards a 4th term in 2022. He's like, yeah, I am going to win the 4th term that my father never had. Well, Andy, all I can say to you is this, buddy. At least your daddy finished his third term. You don't even get to finish your third term, buckaroo. Get out of here. So no, he's a scumbag. Andrew Cuomo could not have happened to a nicer guy. You know, because as they say, for those who make all the Godfather references, you may be the Michael Corleone, but anyone who's seen the third movie, as bad as it is, knows that it does not end well for Michael Corleone either. So let's just kind of recap what happened here. So last week, we had the State Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, came out with a report after weeks of investigation, after allegations of sexual harassment and even occasional sexual assault were made by increasingly like one woman first, and then a second, and then it just piled on and on and on. Kind of like, like with Herman Cain or Roy Moore or Kavanaugh, where it seems like it could be politically motivated. Some of them could be full of it. Some of them could be real. But 11 women ultimately came out to accuse him, some remaining anonymous. And multiple inquiries were opened up. There are several criminal investigations underway, and the state attorney general confirmed she would investigate it. She released her report in a press conference last week, where she ultimately confirmed that her office found that Cuomo harassed at least confirmed sexually harassed 11 women, most of them on the younger side, of course, and some of them current employees for him, as well as one who was a female state trooper. So yeah, I guess he really likes the police. He doesn't want to abolish the police just yet. But it was really just brutal stuff. And I mean, nothing as bad as like what Kavanaugh was accused of as like outright rape, but definitely lots of really creepy stuff and groping and just disgusting comments. But he came out that same day with a very cringe video. It's one of the things you have to see to believe, but he came out with a video basically saying, I deny all of this. I never touched anyone inappropriately. I am Italian. I love to, I kiss a lot of people on the face and on the head. He actually, with this video, a pre-recorded video, by the way, he showed pictures of himself kissing and hugging famous people: Bill Clinton, Al Sharpton, Al Gore, women, people on the street, old veterans. And he's like, I have kissed the faces of white people and black people, of straight and gay, famous people, people on the street, young and old. And it was pointed out to me at the part in the video where he said young, there was a long awkward pause after he said the word young, because he probably realized that might not have been the best thing to say, but it's in the script and I already said it, so I'll just go with it. So, and he denied everything. He basically said, oh, it's my culture, I'm Italian, I say ciao bella to people, I'm Italian, it's like, he really is trying hard, I guess, if nothing else, to compete with Anthony Fauci for the most disgraceful Italian on the planet Earth right now. But nobody bought it. We've
got the Cuomo brothers. We've got Fauci. We've got de Blasio. I don't know. They're not they're not producing their best anymore.
We need to shut down on immigrants from Italy. Okay, just kidding. No, these guys make the mafia look good. I mean, and spoiler alert, with the nursing home thing, it's pretty safe to say that Cuomo has a higher body count than any mafia boss in American history. But I digress. So nobody bought it. No one bought his counter argument. He was mocked mercilessly in the media, and everybody turned on him. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and both senators from New York, Kirsten Gillibrand, and of course the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, all called on him to resign. Speaker of the New York State Assembly, Carl Heastie, confirmed that they were going to speed up they were already looking into impeachment inquiries with the initial allegations, but then after a report, they basically expedited that and were like, yeah, we're really looking into it now. I think like a majority of Democrats in both houses, the state Senate and state Assembly, said they were in favor of impeachment. And that's not even taking into account the Republicans who were in the minority. But of course, you can imagine every Republican would vote in support of that. So it looked like a Nixon situation. They definitely had the votes and they were going to remove him. And he kept saying over and over again, I'm not going to resign. I've did nothing wrong. I will not resign. Then on Tuesday, I'm resigning. I think it's the best way I can help now is if I step aside. And he gave the speech where he's like, we did so much good for New York. He talked about the coronavirus, and this was a great side note, too. At one point, he just suddenly talked about the virus, and he said, this virus ambushed us. It came to our shores. It came over here on planes from Europe. He repeated the lie that it came from Europe, which he said that once before. He called it the European virus. But he talked about it like it was an invading army, like this is Red Dawn or something, and it was parachuting down into New York. But it was melodramatic, but he ultimately announced he will be resigning after 2 weeks. I remember seeing the initial signs that, certainly the report did not help in the calls for resignation, but then earlier in the week on Monday, two of his biggest allies resigned before him. One was his top aide, Melissa DeRosa, who was she played a part in the attempted cover-up of the allegations and even smearing some of the victims, but also was the key player in the nursing home scandal when it was ultimately revealed that his administration covered up the total number of nursing home deaths related to COVID. She was the one who, her statement was leaked to the press confirming that. So a real winner he's got there. Apparently he didn't harass her, because she really was willing to cover up his crimes for him. She resigned on Monday. And then also Roberta Kaplan, the founder and CEO of Time's Up, one of the big, pro-Me Too groups that basically organizes legal help for, alleged victims of famous people, women who were accusing famous men of sexual harassment or whatever. A report confirmed that she had advised Cuomo and his administration on writing an op-ed that he was going to release, smearing one of his accusers and discrediting her accusations. The op-ed ultimately was not published, but the report confirmed that Kaplan did play a role in that, which obviously made her look like a giant hypocrite, and she ultimately resigned on Monday. They both resigned on Monday. When that happened, I started to think, okay, I think the walls are coming down around Camp Cuomo here. Camp Cuomo is starting to look a little bit more like Guantanamo Bay at this point. But that was it. And sure enough, he resigned. He will not even finish his third term. He is done. Put a little bit of Parmesan cheese on him. He is donezo. So what does this mean? We're talking about Cuomo. Now, Cuomo is not going to be the main subject here. This is more of just a preface of the bigger question that I think needs to be asked and has already been discussed quite well. The bigger question that I think should be asked and needs to be discussed, which is this really the big story we want to talk about right now, or is this just a distraction? I think in a lot of ways, this absolutely is a distraction. For one, yes, it's fun to dance on his political grave. He is a total jerk. He's a scumbag. He ran New York like a mafia boss. It literally is responsible for thousands of deaths. He deserves all the humiliation he's going to get. His political career is over. He's never going to be in politics in elected office again. But is this a win for Republicans? Absolutely not. What you have here is now the Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Hochul, is going to be taking over for him. And of course, people are touting that she will be the first female governor of New York State, which, okay, yeah, congratulations. That is now forever going to be a technicality that the first female governor of New York was
not elected.
Not elected, kind of like Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was not elected. LBJ was not elected. But beyond that, assuming Cuomo stayed in, and maybe didn't get impeached. He narrowly survives the impeachment vote, whatever, narrowly wins the nomination again. You now have a really tainted candidate that nobody would touch going into the 2022 election. And yes, it's New York, but you never know, especially now that Biden is president and, the midterms always tend to favor the opposition party. And you have at least two fairly strong candidates for the Republican nomination in that state. You have Congressman Lee Zeldin and Andrew Giuliani, yes, the son of Rudy Giuliani, who are running for that position. Who knows? There could have been a chance that maybe against someone as toxic as Cuomo, seeking a fourth term no less, but also with all this baggage, the nursing home stuff, everything, there could have been a shot now. Now all you get is this woman is going to be the next governor. She probably is going to run again and would easily win that nomination. She's going to be able to wipe her hands clean. Again, it's so convenient that, a woman replaces a guy who just got Me Too'd out of office. She easily wins. She's going to win that election, I think. I think there's now no shot that the Republicans are going to take that governor seat. So all you get is one Democrat in New York State replaced with another Democrat. And the Democrats still have the majority in both houses. So politically, no, that's not a win for Republicans. And for Cuomo, is this even really a loss for Cuomo, or is this a win? Something that a lot of people have mentioned is that this really does allow him to fall on the sword for the lesser of the crimes he committed. Yeah, he was creepy with a bunch of women, okay. He killed thousands of people, literally tens of thousands of senior citizens. He killed them. He sent them to their death. This is someone not Donald Trump. This is someone who actually killed people with disastrous COVID policies.
Yeah, they were having 1,000 deaths a day, I think in New York City alone at some point last April.
Mm-hmm. But just even among the nursing homes as well across the state. And the thing is that because he goes down for this is what the media remembers, is that he was forced out of office by sexual harassment allegations. Not that he was investigated, because now that he's out of office, you better believe these investigations are going to drop. None of the women are going to actually press charges. They never do, just like Roy Moore, just like Herman Cain. Once they drop out, they leave him alone, and that's it. Just like Kavanaugh. The women aren't going to press charges. Letitia James basically announced she does not have the authority to prosecute. He's not going to be prosecuted when he leaves office. So, in terms of the media perception, it's going to be he fell on the sword for the sexual harassment allegations, not for the nursing home stuff, the actual borderline genocide. What does this mean? Is that, of course, he gets off the hook for that. And so do other Democratic governors around the country who have also done this. At least two confirmed. Gretchen Whitmer, another real winner in Michigan, and Tom Wolf in Pennsylvania also had similar scandals, with not quite to the same high degree in terms of the body count, but they also sent senior citizens to their deaths in nursing homes. And now because Cuomo gets off with it because, admittedly it's brushed off because of other crimes, that means no one is going to talk about the nursing home thing anymore. It's not going to get media coverage. It's not going to be media pressure. So Wolf and Whitmer are going to get off scot-free. There's not going to be pressure. If Cuomo had gone down for the nursing home thing, that could have started an avalanche against these other governors, but they're going to get off scot-free. So the greater crime is covered up here. That's one thing. And one other thing that needs to be pointed out is that, of course, Cuomo resigned on Tuesday. He now made his big announcement on Tuesday. What also happened on Tuesday? The United States Senate passed Biden's infrastructure bill, the Invest in America Act.
And nobody pays attention to that now.
Nobody pays attention. Of course not. Nobody. And not only did it pass, because it's a 50-50 Senate, it passed with 69 votes. 19 Republicans sided with the 50 Democrats to pass this disastrous $1 trillion bill, and we've talked about this before. It's not even really an infrastructure bill. It's called infrastructure. The media is going to call it infrastructure. It's more of a Green New Deal / green energy bill, like global warming bill, with a little bit, I think, with some elements of amnesty thrown in there. It's not really about infrastructure. This is more about modernizing natural resources and, green friendly cars and stuff like that. It's not really about fixing roads and bridges. I think they said about $500 billion of it will supposedly be dedicated to roads and actual infrastructure, but that is still half of what Trump wanted to do. And I'm harking back to a previous episode where we responding to Biden's State of the Union and Tim Scott's response specifically, where Tim Scott, on behalf of the Republicans, said, Republicans are the party of infrastructure. Once again, I say to you, Tim Scott, and to the Republicans, where were you when Donald Trump came into office and campaigned on this before and after he won on, I want to pass a $1 trillion infrastructure bill focusing exclusively on roads, bridges, highways, tunnels, airports. This is America first. Let's spend a fraction of what we spend on foreign wars right here fixing the potholes in America.
They're more concerned about cutting the income taxes for their own personal income brackets.
Right. They shut it down because government spending bad. And now, once again, good job, you worthless Republicans. You not only let Biden run away with this. This is one more thing. As we've said on the podcast before, Biden and the Democrats can legitimately say to their voters, we took care of you. We passed this stuff for you as we said we would. The media's going to run cover for him. He basically has just been allowed to extend his honeymoon period. Just when it was getting a little bit rocky with some of the COVID stuff and inflation and whatnot, now suddenly, oh, no, Biden is great again. The narrative, of course, Washington is back to normal. The adults are back in the room because bipartisanship is allowed to happen. And he gets to run away with another part of his legacy that he wants to solidify as the next Eisenhower / FDR / Lyndon Johnson, that I passed this ambitious spending bill. And we are going to take a moment here, of course, because it needs to be said. This wasn't just because 19 Republicans. People think a lot about the handful of the cuck Republicans, Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, whatever. This is more than just that. Here's the full list. Roy Blunt, Missouri. Richard Burr, North Carolina. Shelley Moore Capito, West Virginia. Bill Cassidy, Louisiana. Susan Collins, Maine. Kevin Creamer, North Dakota. Mike Crapo, Idaho, fitting last name. Deb Fisher, Nebraska. Lindsey Graham, the Fox favorite, South Carolina. Chuck Grassley, Iowa. He's still around. John Hoeven, North Dakota. Mitch McConnell, Kentucky. There it is right there. That's why the bill passed. If Mitch supports it, it's going to pass. Rob Portman, Ohio. James Risch, Idaho. Mitt Romney, Utah. Dan Sullivan, Alaska. Tom Tillis, North Carolina. Roger Wicker, Mississippi. So, yeah, you got Romney, you got Collins, you got Murkowski, you've got some of the usual suspects in there. But quite a few of these Republicans aren't like hard, moderate anti-Trumpers. And what I noticed is there's quite a few states here where both senators from those states voted in favor of this bill. Both senators from North Carolina, both senators from North Dakota, both senators from Idaho, both senators from Alaska. These aren't, swing states. These are deep red rural states. North Dakota, Idaho, and these senators are voting for this thing. And yes, of course, on top of that, you've got a couple of the lame duck senators, Roy Blunt retiring next year, Rob Portman. These people are retiring next year, Richard Burr. But at the end of the day, this is a broader problem. You can tell, obviously, with the states, especially the states where both senators voted for it, there's a lot of pork thrown into this bill. Obviously, they said, okay, we'll throw maybe $10 billion in for this reserve over here in North Dakota. And of course, oh yeah, sure, both the senators are going to vote for that. We are sitting back and letting Biden not only run away with more victories that are going to solidify him in the history books and solidify him in the media, but he's redefining what these priorities should mean. Again, this isn't so much a bill for fixing the potholes in the road as it is green energy and, updated energy compliance. It's some elements of the Green New Deal thrown in there. Now, of course, there's talk that the bill may ultimately still get held up in the House because a bunch of the House Democrats, the radicals, AOC and that crowd, will not vote on it until and unless the Senate passes their $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, which includes amnesty, it includes universal free kindergarten and free community college, a variety of other things, again, more Green New Deal stuff, a truly radical spending bill that some publications have described as the most ambitious spending plan of the last 60 years, obviously in reference to Lyndon Johnson, who, of course, Biden aspires to be like. The bottom line here is we shouldn't be distracted by the juiciest stories. Yeah, the juicy story of, oh, we get to see Andrew Cuomo's political head on a pike. Yeah, it's satisfying for a little while. It's juicy. It's the thing that Fox and all the right-wing media is going to talk about all day because it's, and the jokes are strong, and yeah, let's make fun of Cuomo, but we should not miss. This is what Bannon would call the signal and the noise, right? Here's the signal over here to distract you from the noise over here. Mm-hmm. Don't be distracted from the serious shifts that are happening right now politically. Again, Biden's only been in office 6 months, and now he potentially has 2 major trillion-dollar bills that he can say he passed in such a relatively short amount of time. He's already making quick work of stuff that Obama didn't even get passed in this amount of time, or even Trump for that matter.
So it'd be one thing if the Republicans were going along with a bill that was actually a good bill. That would help, go toward critical infrastructure. It wasn't a care package to Democratic constituents. But this is, that's essentially what this is. It does, like you mentioned, it provides about $500 billion towards roads and bridges. It puts forward I think it's $60 billion toward rail to improve rail transportation. Broadband upgrade, that's good. But one of the things that this bill does is they want to completely replace the yellow school buses. So the yellow school buses that we grew up with, they want to get rid of those and replace them with all electric school buses. So this is going to cost. It appropriates $5 billion for zero emissions and clean buses and $2.5 billion for ferries. Another thing that it does is it allegedly addresses racial discrimination infrastructure. And this is one of the myths that's propagated by Black Lives Matter and a lot of black academics, that the interstate system was racist. Yeah, this is, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I don't know if you knew this, but the interstates are racist. If you drive on an interstate.
Oh yeah, they cut off black neighborhoods or something like that?
Yeah. So they allegedly separated black neighborhoods from the rest of society, and as a result, black neighborhoods fell into decay.
Roads are racist. I wonder what libertarians would have to say about that.
Well, libertarians would be all for it. This is where they say, yeah, see, this is an area where we agree with the left on. We need to get rid of public roads. But so this includes $1 billion to reconnect communities. Now, this is allegedly to destroy parks, revamp planning and design, and reconstruct street grids so that way these historic black communities will be reconnected with the city core. I guess that's what they're wanting to do. But the thing is, this was the interstate system was built in the 50s and 60s. These communities don't even look the same anymore. They're completely, this has been half a century. You got generations who have moved away, new generations who have moved in. So, this, to me, this looks like a bunch of pork to possibly politically connected construction companies. This looks like, straight up writ large corruption. Another thing it does is it puts new regulations on cryptocurrencies, so it reports the reporting of cryptocurrency transactions to raise billions of dollars on that. And it also delays the drug rebate rule. Remember the Trump administration, the rule that he put on drug companies that their pricing that they couldn't.
It lowered the prices basically for most consumers?
Yeah, so it banned drug manufacturers from providing rebates to pharmacy benefit managers and insurers. So instead, drug companies they were encouraged to pass the discounts directly to patients and the pharmacy counter. So it took out the middleman. So the Biden administration, this bill pushes that back.
Right.
It pushes it back. It basically cancels it. Biden says that he wants to eventually implement it, but maybe he wants to wait till 2023 or so to do that.
Sure. In the midst of a pandemic, let's give Big Pharma even more freedom to jack up prices as much as they want.
And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they mentioned that this is kind of when they noticed things start to go south for Trump. politically was when he ran up against Big Pharma. When he kicked Big Pharma, it was like he kicked the hornet's nest, and that's when all the funding started. The Democratic campaign coffers just started to fill.
Right.
But
again,
Biden isn't going to...
That was one of the many sacred cows that Trump was not afraid to attack because he was a true outsider in it. But of course, they went all in for Biden, knowing that Biden will give them back all the protections, and all the while, both Biden and the media will run cover for Big Pharma as heroes because they're doing everything with vaccines in the middle of the pandemic.
And I haven't looked at the specifics of I haven't read the bill itself. I've just read news articles on it. This was the CNN article that I was just reading. But is it, I don't know if you've looked at it or not, but allegedly this bill includes plans to implement a per mile tax. So every mile you drive, you're taxed for.
I heard that there are plans like kind of to test that out, like a mileage tax. So there are plans to kind of do like a little test run of that or something. I'm not 100% sure on the details of that, but yeah, I think that is in the bill. Because that's infrastructure, right? Taxing every mile we drive on the highway, guys. Or potentially, again, I think it's like obviously there's no way they could implement that right now. So yeah, it's like a trial run of some kind.
Yes, this is from Forbes. The infrastructure bill includes $125 million to fund pilot programs to test a national vehicle miles traveled fee. So what this is, would charge motorists a fee based on how many miles they drive. So if you drive a vehicle, you would pay money to the government for every mile you drive. So the fee is used to raise revenue for transportation infrastructure, kind of like a gas tax. But instead of just taxing your gasoline, they want to tax the gasoline and charge you per mile. So it includes $10 million each year from 2022 to 2026 for a national vehicles miles traveled fee pilot program. The goal for this is to test the feasibility of a road usage fee. Another goal is to, this is good, to quote, to conduct public education and outreach to increase public awareness regarding the need for user-based alternative revenue mechanisms for surface transportation programs. So a lot of this is used for propaganda. A lot of the spending for this mileage fee is just for propaganda to educate Americans on why they need to pay the federal government for every single mile that they drive. So following the completion of the program, the Biden administration may or may not implement a vehicle miles traveled fee. During the pilot program, there will be volunteers from all 50 states, including both passenger and commercial vehicles. Why volunteers? I mean, if they're spending, what is this, $125 million, they could afford to pay these people. But there's going to be volunteers from all 50 states, including both passenger and commercial vehicles. The drivers would have their miles tracked with GPS and data apps.
So yeah, this infrastructure package, which basically flirts with the possibility of taxing you for every mile you drive. That is what this is really all about. This is not infrastructure any more than, the coronavirus bill was not really about coronavirus. It was stimulus, it was pork. This is pork. And certainly, as people have pointed out, yeah, we dunk on fiscal conservatives all the time, rightfully so. But it does need to be said, as inflation is on the rise, this bill, and certainly alongside the reconciliation bill, would be absolutely disastrous for the economy right now. The economy is not doing well. We talked about before how the eviction moratorium crisis could very well lead to a crisis even worse than 2008 when that moratorium finally expires. The inflation is not helping. The economy is not recovering nearly as fast as it should. The July jobs report was a disaster. It was 300,000 below expectations. Things are not going well right now. So we can have fun and dunk on Andrew Cuomo and other Democrats who may fall every now and then. But at the end of the day, we should not lose sight of the bigger picture, which these issues will ultimately decide 2022. Republicans can and should campaign on how disastrous this bill is, but at the end of the day, we also need to realize this makes the Democrats stronger. This makes Biden and the Democrats in 2022 that much stronger because they can go to their voters and say, we gave you your, $10 billion for this, project here in Idaho. We gave you funding for this. They take care of their voters. They're not betraying their voters. They're not letting their voters down like Republicans always do. That is all the time we have left for this episode of The Right Take. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to follow us at our website, righttakepodcast.com. Feel free to donate to us if you are feeling so generous, righttakepodcast.com/support, and follow all of our social media feeds and podcast platforms where we are available, righttakepodcast.com/subscribe. We'll talk to you next week, guys.